The warship glided silently through the black expanse of space, its metallic hull gleaming under distant starlight. Inside, the corridors hummed with energy, filled with the quiet footsteps of officers and recruits. Among them, Lyra walked with a mixture of pride and unease. She was young, barely 17 by her people's standards, but already recognized for her skills in navigation and strategy. Yet today, something pressed heavily against her heart, something she could not name. The training deck was unusually tense. Commander Kale stood at the center, his sharp green eyes scanning the room with precision. Every movement he made radiated authority, and even seasoned officers instinctively straightened their posture in his presence. Kale was known for his strictness, and his expectations were absolute. No one had ever questioned him openly, and he expected the same from Lyra. Lyra stopped a few feet from him, trying to steady her breathing. Her mind replayed the events of the past weeks. Since the war with human colonies began, she had trained tirelessly, learning tactics and combat drills, preparing for the day she might face humanity's forces directly. But lately, doubt had begun to creep in. She could feel it growing stronger, especially since the arrival of a human envoy named Jaren. The human had been brought aboard under heavy guard, his hands and legs bound in light restraint fields. Unlike most humans, who seemed nervous and fragile compared to their alien counterparts, Jaren held himself with calm and quiet confidence. There was a sense of awareness in his amber eyes, as though he understood far more than he let on. He had asked for nothing and resisted provocation, which had unsettled many of Kale's officers. "Lyra," Kale's voice broke through her thoughts, crisp and commanding. "You will observe the human closely, report every detail, no assumptions, no mistakes." She could not deny a flicker of curiosity. She wanted to understand humans to see why Kale considered them dangerous. Yet beneath that curiosity, a subtle unease stirred. Hours passed as Lyra studied Jaren in the observation chamber. He moved calmly, almost gracefully, analyzing his surroundings with a steady focus. His eyes met hers once briefly, and she felt a strange warmth, not fear or hostility, but something that pulled at her curiosity. Lyra shook her head. Humans were not supposed to inspire anything but caution in aliens. That was what she had been taught. That was what Kale insisted upon, and yet she could not ignore it. Finally, when the ship settled into orbit near a neutral sector, Kale entered the chamber. His presence seemed to fill the room. "Have you learned anything, Lyra?" he asked, voice sharp and precise. Lyra hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "He does not seem aggressive. He observes and adapts quickly. He studies others before acting." Do not be deceived by appearances. Humans survive because they exploit weakness and opportunity. They are unpredictable and dangerous. Remember this. He looked around with quiet curiosity, taking in the alien design, the instruments, and the faint hum of energy. When his gaze met Lyra's, there was no hostility, only calm acknowledgement. "You are Lyra," he said simply. "I've heard about you. About your people, your history, your family." They were part of the first group humans saved long ago, after a disaster that nearly wiped your species from existence. They protected knowledge, guided survivors, and ensured your people endured. To hear it from a human, it was disorienting. "How do you know this?" she whispered. "I have studied human history. We remember the sacrifices and the courage of those who came before us," Jaren said quietly. "Your parents were heroes to us, not enemies." Memories of childhood stories, of secret journals hidden in her quarters, and whispers from elders all came rushing back. Humans, she realized, were not the monsters she had been trained to believe. They had saved lives, they had endured. They had survived when others thought it impossible, and her family had been part of that story. Kale's voice broke through her thoughts from the corridor outside, calling for her to report immediately. She turned to Jaren, uncertainty and conflict in her eyes. I need time to understand this," she said. He nodded. "You will. Just remember, not everything is as it seems. Sometimes the greatest enemies are the ones we imagine, not the ones who truly stand before us." She walked through the corridors, her eyes noticing details she had ignored before, the way officers moved with tension, the quiet whispers of recruits, the subtle energy shifts that spoke of hidden fear and loyalty. She realized she had been part of a machine, following rules without question. Now the gears of her understanding were grinding in new directions. Later in the observation deck, she watched as Jaren interacted with other humans brought aboard for study. They moved with curiosity and intelligence, asking questions and learning rapidly. They adapted to alien technology in ways she had never imagined. Each moment reinforced a growing admiration and the HFY truth she was beginning to embrace. Humans survived not because they were the strongest, but because they were clever, resilient, and determined to endure. Kale entered silently, observing her from behind. "You spend too much time watching, Lyra," he said. "Action is what matters, not idle observation. Do not let curiosity weaken you." The following day, Kale summoned her to the bridge. The ship was preparing to move to a human-controlled sector, and intelligence suggested that humans might be gathering resistance forces. Lyra's heart beat faster. She had trained for this moment, but now, armed with new understanding, the lines of duty felt blurred. "Your task," Kale said, "is to accompany the strike team, observe the humans. Report any weakness or opportunity. Failure is not tolerated." As the warship exited hyperspace near the human sector, alarms blared softly. Sensors detected activity on the planet below. Lyra's hands hovered over her controls, heart hammering. The strike team prepared to deploy, and Kale's voice rang through the comms, cold and precise. "Remember, Lyra, humans are the enemy. Do not hesitate." Her chest tightened, the weight of choice pressing down upon her. A sudden alert flashed on her console, Jaren's signal. He had transmitted a private message through secure channels. "Lyra, trust yourself. Remember who you are and what your family stood for. Not all enemies are true enemies. Some truths are hidden until the moment you need them most." Lyra read the message over and over, letting the words sink into her mind. A strange calm filled her. She realized she had a choice, not just between orders and doubt, but between fear and courage, between blind obedience and understanding. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it with eyes wide open. The strike team deployed, and Lyra followed, her pulse steady despite the adrenaline. She moved with grace and awareness, observing the humans without bias, noting their resilience and clever strategies. Every action they took reinforced the lesson she had begun to learn. Survival and ingenuity could be stronger than brute force. Humans were clever, determined, and capable of inspiring hope even in the hearts of those trained to hate them. As night fell over the human settlement, Lyra paused on a ridge overlooking the valley below. The stars reflected in her eyes, and she felt a connection not only to the humans beneath her, but to the legacy of her own family. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "You're not my enemy, not yet, maybe never." The galaxy was watching, and humanity, even unseen, had already begun to leave its mark. The first rays of the distant sun filtered through the ship's observation deck, casting long shadows across the polished metal floor. Lyra stood silently, staring out at the expanse of stars stretching endlessly in all directions. Her mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. The message from Jaren still echoed in her thoughts. Not all enemies are true enemies. Some truths are hidden until the moment you need them most. The humans were the enemy, and Lyra's duty was to follow those orders without hesitation. But following them now felt like betraying something deep inside her, a spark of understanding, a growing sense that the truth was not as simple as Kale insisted. Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by the soft hum of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Jaren walking calmly into the observation deck, his expression unreadable but his eyes warm and focused. "You've been thinking a lot," he said gently. "It shows you are not blind to the truth." But the pull of curiosity and the need for guidance was stronger. She nodded. I cannot stop thinking. I trained to see humans as enemies, but I see now that they are more than that. I don't know what to do." "Learn from what you see, and remember what your parents taught you. Courage and wisdom can change the course of events." Lyra wanted to believe she could act with the same courage, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon her. Choosing the wrong side could bring disaster, not only to herself but to those she cared about. The day passed in a blur of training exercises and briefings. Lyra's performance was flawless, but her mind was elsewhere. She noticed every movement of the human observers, every interaction, and every subtle gesture. They were resilient, learning quickly, and adapting to the alien environment in ways even Kale did not anticipate. She began to understand something profound. Humans survived not because they were the strongest or most advanced, but because they were clever, adaptive, and unwilling to surrender even in the face of overwhelming odds. Late in the evening, Lyra returned to her quarters. The walls of her room, usually a comforting reminder of home, now felt confining. She paced slowly, grappling with the conflict within her. Duty demanded loyalty to Kale, but conscience urged her to look deeper. She opened a small data pad, secretly accessed her parents' old records, and read passages she had never fully understood before. Her parents had worked tirelessly to protect both human and alien knowledge during the early wars, teaching survival, resilience, and moral courage. They had believed in alliances, not division, and in understanding rather than blind obedience. A soft chime alerted her to a new message. She hesitated, then opened it carefully. It was Jaren, sending encrypted observations from the humans on the colony below. He described their daily routines, their ingenuity in building defenses, and the subtle ways they communicated and supported one another. Every word reinforced what she already suspected. Humans were capable of remarkable acts of bravery, intelligence, and unity. They were survivors, and their strength came not from weapons alone, but from their spirit. Lyra felt a small smile touch her lips. The humans were ordinary in many ways, yet extraordinary in their resolve. She realized that Kale's insistence on labeling them enemies was a simplification, a way to maintain control and avoid questioning deeper truths. And now she understood why her parents had valued understanding and compassion. They recognized that strength was not always measured in force, but in courage and moral clarity. The next morning, the warship approached the human-controlled sector. Alarms signaled potential activity, and the strike team readied themselves for deployment. Lyra stood among them, her nerves taut but her mind clear. The mission was to observe, report, and prepare for possible engagement, but she could not ignore what she had learned. She would act with caution and intelligence, and she would protect innocent lives if necessary, even if it meant defying orders. As they descended toward the planet, Lyra noticed the humans below. They worked together to repair structures, organize defenses, and tend to their communities. It was clear that they were aware of the alien presence, yet they showed no signs of panic. Their movements were precise, adaptive, and cooperative, a testament to their resilience and ingenuity. She felt a stirring of admiration and respect that she could not suppress. Humans were clever, resourceful, and determined. The strike team landed near the outskirts of a human settlement. Kale's voice crackled through the comms, cold and commanding. Observe carefully. Do not engage unless instructed. Any hesitation will be considered failure. She followed the team, careful not to draw attention, while keeping her gaze fixed on the humans. They moved with strategy, using their knowledge of the terrain and teamwork to overcome obstacles that might have defeated stronger opponents. Lyra felt a pang of admiration for them, even as Kale's orders reminded her of the strict hierarchy she was sworn to obey. During a quiet moment, she spotted a small group of humans struggling to carry supplies across rough terrain. Their movements were coordinated, yet they faced difficulty, and it became clear that without intervention, the supplies might be lost. Lyra hesitated. The instinct to help was strong, echoing her parents' teachings and the values Jaren had reminded her of. With a quick glance to ensure Kale could not see her, she adjusted her trajectory slightly to assist the humans. The group noticed the unexpected help but did not panic. They adapted quickly, using the advantage to complete the task. Lyra felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. The humans had survived, not because of brute strength, but because they were clever, adaptive, and willing to act with cooperation. She began to understand the truth of Jaren's message. Not all enemies were true enemies, and understanding could change everything. Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the settlement, Kale called for a debrief. The strike team assembled, tense and alert. Lyra reported the observations, carefully omitting her intervention. Kale's eyes, sharp and piercing, scanned her report. He frowned, sensing a subtle difference in her tone, a hesitation that had not been there before. "Your observations are noted," he said coldly. "But remember, loyalty is paramount. Doubt is dangerous. Humans are unpredictable. Do not let curiosity compromise your judgment." The humans had survived, adapted, and thrived despite challenges that would have destroyed many others. Their courage and ingenuity were not extraordinary in a fantastical sense, but in a real and meaningful way. They reflected the enduring strength of humanity itself. Lyra realized that Kale's strict teachings, while valuable in some ways, had blinded her to an important truth. Strength and survival came not only from obedience but from intelligence, courage, and the willingness to act morally. A soft light illuminated her face as she looked out the viewport, staring at the distant stars. She thought of her parents, of Jaren, and of the humans she had observed today. The galaxy was vast and full of danger, but it was also full of hope and possibility. For the first time, Lyra felt that hope was something she could carry forward, something that could guide her choices in the uncertain days ahead. And somewhere deep within the ship, Kale's watchful eyes noticed the shift. He could sense the change, subtle but undeniable. Lyra was thinking for herself now, questioning orders and observing the truth. The spark of independent thought had been ignited, and he knew that its consequences could reach far beyond what he intended. Lyra lay down that night with her thoughts racing, feeling both fear and excitement. She had begun to see humans not as enemies, but as beings of remarkable resilience, intelligence, and courage. She had begun to understand the legacy of her parents and the lessons they had tried to pass on. And she had begun to realize that the choices she made next would not only define her future, but could alter the fate of both human and alien lives. The first step had been observation, the second understanding. Now, as sleep began to claim her, Lyra understood that the next step, action, would test everything she had learned, everything she believed, and everything she hoped for. The galaxy was watching, and so was she. She closed her eyes, feeling a quiet determination grow within her. She would act wisely, act bravely, and act with courage. Humanity had survived against impossible odds, and perhaps now she too could survive, and help others survive, not through force alone, but through understanding, intelligence, and heart. The warship descended slowly toward the planet below, its shadow stretching across the human settlement like a dark promise. Lyra's heart raced as she stood among the strike team, her fingers brushing against the controls instinctively. The humans had been clever in their defenses, adapting their positions in ways that even Kale's sensors had struggled to predict. Lyra could feel her resolve hardening. Today, she would see their strength firsthand. Commander Kale's voice echoed through the comms, sharp and uncompromising. "Deploy, observe, report. Any hesitation will be considered failure. Remember, they are the enemy." They were beings who fought not just to survive, but to protect each other, to preserve life in the face of danger. Every instinct in her chest told her that blindly following orders could cause unnecessary harm. The strike team exited the ship and moved through the rocky terrain toward the settlement. The humans below noticed them immediately, raising alarms and activating defensive measures. Yet their movements were calculated, almost elegant, despite the chaos. They used makeshift barricades, rapid signaling, and improvised weapons to slow the advance of the more powerful aliens. Lyra followed quietly, observing every action. She could see the intelligence behind each human decision, the way they worked together, communicated silently, and adapted to threats in real time. Their resilience was inspiring, and she felt a swell of admiration she could not suppress. A sudden explosion nearby shook the ground, throwing some of the humans off balance. Lyra instinctively moved toward the group, using her training to protect them from debris. She knew Kale's sensors would not detect this act as intentional, but her heart told her she could not stand by and let innocent lives be lost. The humans recovered quickly, reorganizing themselves with speed and determination. One human, a young boy no older than 10, struggled to lift a crate of supplies that had been knocked over by the blast. Lyra hesitated, then adjusted her path to help him. Together, they moved the supplies to a safer location. The boy looked up at her, eyes wide with surprise, but he did not retreat. He seemed to understand that help, even from an alien, could make the difference between failure and survival. Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was the humanity her parents had spoken of, the courage to act, to protect, and to endure despite overwhelming odds. She realized that human strength was not just in physical ability or weapons, but in their intelligence, cooperation, and moral courage. Every moment of observation reinforced the truth. Humans were formidable not because they were larger or stronger, but because they were clever, adaptive, and unyielding in the face of danger. The strike team pressed forward, following Kale's orders, but Lyra found herself torn. Every step she took toward the humans made her heart heavier, and yet she could not deny the admiration that grew with each passing moment. She was learning that strength and courage could take many forms, and that morality and intelligence were just as vital as power. As they neared the center of the settlement, Lyra saw the humans coordinating a countermeasure against the alien attack. Using their knowledge of the terrain, they created traps and diversions that slowed the advance of the more technologically advanced aliens. Lyra's respect deepened. These people were ordinary, yet they accomplished extraordinary feats because they refused to surrender. Suddenly, Kale's voice cut through the comms, harsh and urgent. "Lyra, Engage the humans, do not hesitate. This is your test. She moved quickly, positioning herself between the strike team and a small group of humans who were clearly struggling to defend themselves. Her actions caused a ripple of confusion among her own team. Aliens paused, unsure why their comrade had deviated from orders. Kale's voice rang out, sharp and furious. Lyra, explain yourself. Instead, she focused on the humans below, calculating the safest path for them to evade the strike team. She adjusted the terrain sensors to create small diversions, giving them time and space to move. The humans responded quickly, using the opportunity to reorganize and protect vulnerable members. Lyra felt a surge of pride and hope. This was the difference she could make, using intelligence and courage to preserve life rather than destroy it. The strike team regrouped, frustrated by the unexpected complications. Kale's frustration was palpable, and Lyra could feel the tension rising. Yet she stood her ground, knowing that she was doing the right thing. She had learned that true strength was not just following orders, but knowing when to act with courage, compassion, and intelligence. As the battle continued, Lyra saw humans using ingenuity to turn the tide. They created barriers from debris, coordinated ambushes with minimal resources, and communicated silently to outmaneuver the aliens. Lyra realized that this was the essence of humanity: resilience, adaptability, and cleverness in the face of danger. Her admiration grew as she observed them. Humans were not perfect, but they were remarkable in their determination to survive and protect each other. Every action, every quick decision, every small act of courage reinforced the HFY truth she had come to embrace. Humans could endure, adapt, and inspire even those who had been taught to see them as enemies. Kale's frustration reached a peak. He called for a regrouping, but Lyra knew that the time for passive observation was over. She had to act, not only to protect the humans, but to assert her own understanding of what was right. She moved decisively, coordinating the humans' escape paths and creating obstacles to slow the strike team. Her actions were precise, effective, and daring. The humans noticed her intervention, but rather than fear, they responded with quick adjustments. They adapted to her guidance, using the advantages she provided to evade capture and protect their settlement. Lyra felt a sense of exhilaration and fulfillment. She had used her knowledge, her intelligence, and her courage to help them survive. This was the essence of what her parents had taught her, and what Jaren had reminded her. Courage, intelligence, and moral clarity could change outcomes, even in the most dangerous situations. Kale confronted her on the battlefield, his expression cold and sharp. Lyra, you defied orders, you jeopardized the mission. I could not follow orders that would harm innocent lives. They are not our enemies. The strike team hesitated, uncertain how to respond. Lyra's courage had shaken the rigid structure of command, revealing a truth that could not be ignored. The humans continued to adapt and survive, inspired in part by her intervention, demonstrating once again the resilience and ingenuity that defined their species. As the battle drew to a close, the humans had successfully defended key positions, minimizing casualties and preserving their resources. Lyra observed the outcome with a mix of relief and pride. She had learned a vital lesson. Intelligence, adaptability, and courage could overcome raw power, and understanding could be a greater weapon than any technology or force. Kale's gaze lingered on her, unreadable yet intense. He knew that Lyra had changed, that her understanding of humanity had shifted, and that the rigid control he relied upon might no longer be absolute. For the first time, he recognized that the strength of humans and the courage of those willing to protect them could not be dismissed. Lyra returned to the warship, exhausted but resolute. She knew that the days ahead would test her further, challenging her loyalty, courage, and moral judgment. Yet she also knew that she had acted rightly and that her understanding of humanity and herself had grown stronger. She carried with her the HFY truth that humans were not merely survivors. They were beings of remarkable resilience, intelligence, and moral courage. That night, as she looked out across the stars from her quarters, Lyra reflected on the events of the day. She had faced her first true test, and in doing so, she had learned the power of choice, the importance of courage, and the enduring strength of humanity. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and uncertainty, but it was also full of hope, intelligence, and resilience. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the quiet determination within her solidify. She would continue to act with intelligence, courage, and moral clarity. She would protect those who needed it, inspire those who doubted, and embrace the lessons of the humans she had come to respect. And somewhere deep within the ship, Kale watched silently, aware that the actions of one young alien had begun to challenge the assumptions of an entire hierarchy. Lyra's journey had only begun, and the choices she would make next could change the fate of both human and alien worlds. The first battle was over, but the war and the opportunity for understanding, courage, and survival had only just begun. Lyra had seen the strength of humanity in action, and she knew that it was a force that could not be ignored, underestimated, or defeated by fear alone. The warship drifted above the planet like a silent predator, but the atmosphere on board had changed. Lyra moved through the corridors with confidence, her steps measured and sure. She had acted decisively in the recent engagement, saving humans from unnecessary harm, and she had felt the spark of strength and clarity that came with knowing she had chosen rightly. Yet she also knew that Kale's watchful eyes were on her, piercing through her every movement, waiting for a reason to punish what he saw as defiance. She paused outside the bridge, her hand resting lightly on the door. Inside, Kale and his senior officers were reviewing the battle data, their faces tight with tension. Lyra drew a deep breath and stepped in, alert to every detail. Kale's gaze immediately fixed on her, sharp and demanding. "You will explain yourself," he said without preamble. "Your actions during the engagement were unexpected. They disrupted the operation and undermined the mission. They are not our enemies. They survived challenges we underestimated, and their actions showed me that humanity is more than a threat. They are capable, clever, and morally strong. Do you understand the consequences of this defiance?" Lyra could sense a subtle shift. Authority alone could not command obedience when conviction and moral clarity were so clearly displayed. Kale's hands clenched into fists, and he leaned forward slightly. "You are still learning. You think you know what is right, but your judgment is incomplete. Humanity is unpredictable. You cannot trust them." "I do not blindly trust them. I observe, understand, and act. I have seen their strength, their courage, and their ingenuity. They survive because they adapt, cooperate, and make choices that preserve life, not destroy it. That is something worth respecting, even learning from." Officers had followed orders, and dissent had been punished swiftly. Yet Lyra's conviction was not born of arrogance. It was born of understanding, experience, and a recognition of human resilience that even he could not deny. One of the senior officers, a seasoned strategist named Verk, spoke cautiously. "Commander, her observations are accurate. Humans have demonstrated resilience beyond our expectations. Perhaps we underestimated them. It is understanding the environment, adapting, and protecting those who cannot defend themselves. Humans embody that principle, and I believe we can learn from them rather than blindly fight them." Others remained rigid, unwilling to challenge Kale openly. The young alien stood firm, realizing that courage was not always measured in combat. It could also be measured in the strength to speak truth in the face of authority. Kale's expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his face. For a brief moment, it seemed he considered her words. Then his eyes hardened once more. "You will not act on your sentiments without orders," he said finally, his tone sharp. "We have a mission to complete. Your loyalty will be tested further. Do not forget your duty." That night she returned to her quarters, reflecting on the events of the day. She thought about the humans' clever strategies, their courage under fire, and their unwavering cooperation. They were not invincible, but they were resourceful, quick-thinking, and morally strong. Every action she had observed reinforced the HFY truth. Humanity's greatest strength was its intelligence, its adaptability, and its courage to act for the greater good. As she studied the battle data again, Lyra noticed something remarkable. The humans had exploited every small advantage, turning obstacles into opportunities and setbacks into lessons. They had survived not because of brute force or superior technology, but because they had used intelligence and teamwork to navigate challenges. Their ingenuity reminded her of the lessons her parents had tried to teach her: adapt, endure, and act with courage and moral clarity. The next day, Kale called for a strategic briefing. Lyra entered the room with the other officers, prepared to contribute. Kale outlined plans for a larger operation, intended to pressure the humans into submission. He emphasized strict adherence to orders, expecting absolute obedience. Lyra listened carefully, analyzing the plans with a critical eye. She could see weaknesses, inefficiencies, and points where human ingenuity could exploit the alien strategies. She also saw opportunities, not to undermine the mission entirely, but to minimize unnecessary harm and preserve lives. When Kale asked for input, Lyra spoke cautiously but firmly. "Commander, if I may, there are ways to achieve our objectives without causing unnecessary destruction. Humans are adaptive and intelligent. If we rely solely on force, we may provoke unnecessary resistance. By observing and understanding them, we can achieve our goals while limiting casualties. If we use knowledge and strategy rather than brute force, we may accomplish our mission more effectively." Lyra's heart raced, knowing that her observations had struck a nerve. She had challenged authority before, but now she had provided evidence, insight, and reason. Her understanding of humans had become a force in itself, shaping strategy and questioning blind obedience. That evening, Lyra moved through the corridors, reflecting on her position. She had seen the strength and courage of humanity firsthand. She had acted to protect them, guided by the lessons of her parents and the wisdom Jaren had shared. And now, she realized that true leadership required more than obedience. It required understanding, intelligence, and the courage to act rightly, even when others demanded otherwise. A sudden alert flashed across her console. Sensors detected a small group of human scouts moving near the edge of the settlement. They were lightly armed, clearly on a reconnaissance mission. Kale's comms ordered immediate engagement. The strike team prepared to descend, ready to attack. Lyra's hands hovered over her controls. She knew that engaging would result in unnecessary casualties. She also knew that disobedience would provoke Kale's wrath. Yet, the lesson she had learned in the last battle guided her. Courage, intelligence, and moral clarity were worth more than fear. She adjusted the targeting system subtly, creating paths that would allow the human scouts to avoid the strike team while still maintaining the illusion of engagement. The humans responded quickly, adapting to the diversion. They moved with precision and intelligence, avoiding the traps and obstacles that had been placed in their path. Lyra felt a surge of pride. Her actions had protected them without compromising the mission entirely. She had found a balance between duty and conscience, a demonstration of what true courage could accomplish. Kale's voice erupted over the comms, sharp and furious. "Lyra, report your actions." Kale's fury was clear, but he also recognized the effectiveness of her actions. Lyra had preserved lives, minimized resistance, and maintained the mission's integrity. Her courage, intelligence, and understanding had produced a result that even he could not ignore. As the operation concluded, the humans had survived with minimal casualties, their resilience and ingenuity shining once again. Lyra observed their actions with admiration. They were not invincible, but they were remarkable in their ability to adapt, survive, and act courageously. Every lesson, every observation reinforced the HFY truth. Humanity's strength lay in its intelligence, adaptability, and moral courage. That night, as Lyra looked out across the stars from her quarters, she reflected on the day's events. She had faced her first true test of courage and conviction. She had acted with intelligence, moral clarity, and bravery, protecting the humans and challenging authority. And in doing so, she had embraced the values that her parents had taught her and that Jaren had reminded her of. Courage, understanding, and resilience could change the outcome of any situation. Somewhere deep within the ship, Kale's gaze lingered on her actions. He understood that Lyra had grown beyond the strict control of orders. She had begun to embody the strength of humanity herself: intelligence, adaptability, courage, and moral clarity. The young alien had become a force that could not be ignored, and her influence was spreading, subtly but surely, among the officers who witnessed her courage. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling a quiet determination settle in her chest. She knew that the days ahead would challenge her further, testing her loyalty, her judgment, and her courage. But she also knew that she was ready. She would continue to act with intelligence, understanding, and bravery, protecting those who could not protect themselves and demonstrating the enduring strength of humanity in a galaxy that often misunderstood it. The stars above shimmered like distant promises, and Lyra felt the weight of responsibility and possibility settle upon her. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and uncertain, yet it was also full of hope, intelligence, and resilience. And she had become a part of that hope, a bridge between humans and aliens, courage and understanding, strength and morality. The next confrontation was inevitable. Kale's authority would be tested, her convictions challenged, and the truth of humanity's strength would be revealed to all. Lyra felt ready. She had seen courage in action, intelligence at work, and the enduring power of moral clarity. And now she would face the ultimate test, proving not just her own strength, but the strength of humanity itself. The warship hovered silently above the planet as dawn broke, casting a soft glow over the rugged landscape below. Lyra stood at the observation deck, her eyes fixed on the human settlement. The events of the past days had left her exhausted but more certain than ever of what she must do. She had acted with intelligence and courage, protected humans, and challenged Kale's strict authority. Yet the final test awaited her, a confrontation that would define not just her future, but the future of the humans and aliens who now shared this space. Kale entered the deck quietly, his expression unreadable. He did not issue orders immediately, allowing the silence to stretch and weigh heavily in the room. Finally, he spoke. Lyra, your actions have disrupted plans, challenged authority, and demonstrated unusual judgment. Explain yourself fully. We could achieve more by observing, learning, and cooperating rather than blindly attacking. We are stronger when we act with intelligence, moral clarity, and courage. The humans have survived and thrived despite overwhelming odds. Their resilience is remarkable. To destroy them blindly would be to ignore the strength that could benefit both our species. Some glanced at Lyra with newfound respect, realizing that her words carried weight beyond mere defiance. She had acted decisively, protected lives, and revealed the limitations of blind obedience. Finally, Kale spoke again, his tone measured. If what you say is true, then you must prove it. There is a faction of my officers who still seek direct engagement. They do not trust your judgment, nor the human's strength. If you are right, you must demonstrate it. Kale's fleet would engage only minimally, using restraint while Lyra coordinated with the humans to repel attacks from hidden alien forces who sought to provoke conflict. Success would require precise timing, intelligence, and courage. Failure could result in disaster. Lyra moved quickly, analyzing the terrain below and coordinating with the humans. She relayed instructions subtly, guiding them to use natural barriers, improvised traps, and tactical diversions. Her interventions were delicate, ensuring the humans remained unaware of her influence while still gaining a decisive advantage. The humans adapted instantly, using their ingenuity and teamwork to respond to each challenge. They created obstacles, redirected enemy forces, and communicated silently to coordinate their defense. Lyra felt a swell of pride and admiration. Each move demonstrated the essence of humanity, cleverness, adaptability, and courage in the face of danger. Kale watched from above, tense and silent. He could see the effectiveness of Lyra's actions and the humans' response. They were surviving, thriving even, in ways that raw power alone could not achieve. Slowly, he began to understand the truth she had been conveying all along. Strength was not just measured in weapons or force, but in intelligence, adaptability, and moral courage. A sudden explosion rocked the settlement as a rogue group of alien insurgents attacked. Lyra's heart pounded, but she remained calm, issuing precise instructions to both humans and compliant officers. She calculated the best way to minimize casualties and maximize defensive advantage. Humans responded with remarkable speed, using every small resource to counter the threat. In the midst of chaos, Lyra spotted a young human woman trapped under debris. Without hesitation, she maneuvered through the dangerous zone, carefully lifting the rubble with her own strength. The woman looked up, eyes wide with gratitude and awe. Lyra nodded briefly before moving on, focusing on the larger strategic picture. She realized then that courage was not just about fighting enemies. It was about protecting the innocent, about acting decisively when lives hung in the balance. The rogue insurgents pressed their attack, but Lyra's interventions and the humans' adaptability kept them at bay. She coordinated traps, guided reinforcements, and anticipated movements with precision. Every decision reinforced the lesson she had embraced. Intelligence, courage, and understanding could triumph over raw force. Kale's voice broke through the comms, tense but controlled. Lyra, your actions are effective, but you are still defying direct orders. How can I trust this approach? Observe what humans can achieve with guidance, not destruction. They survive and adapt. They act with courage and intelligence, that is strength. Lyra realized that change was spreading, subtle but undeniable within the ranks. As the battle drew to a close, the insurgents retreated, defeated by a combination of human ingenuity and strategic guidance. The settlement had survived with minimal losses, a testament to the resilience and intelligence of its inhabitants. Lyra's heart swelled with quiet triumph. She had acted decisively, protected lives, and demonstrated the power of understanding over blind obedience. Kale stepped forward, his expression complex, almost unreadable. Lyra, your actions have saved lives and achieved results beyond what I expected. You have demonstrated that intelligence, courage, and moral clarity are as important as strength in battle. You have changed the way we perceive strength, strategy, and survival. Humanity is not the enemy, as I once believed, and perhaps there is wisdom in learning from them. Lyra's courage, intelligence, and moral clarity had begun to influence the very hierarchy that had once demanded unquestioning obedience. Lyra returned to the observation deck, her mind quiet for the first time in days. She looked down at the humans below, tending to their settlement, repairing damage, and caring for each other. Their resilience, ingenuity, and courage had impressed her deeply. They were not perfect, but their strength lay in their ability to survive, adapt, and act with intelligence and moral clarity. A calm signal drew her attention. Jaren's voice, calm and steady, came through. Lyra, you have done well. You have shown courage, intelligence, and understanding. You have proven that humans are worthy of respect and cooperation. Your actions will inspire change. Your people's skills and humanity's resilience together can create something greater than either alone. Remember that. The galaxy is watching, and your choices will shape its future. She had faced her first major test, protected humans, challenged authority, and acted with intelligence and moral courage. She had seen the power of human ingenuity and resilience firsthand, and she understood now why Kale and others had underestimated them. Humans were not mere survivors. They were extraordinary in their ability to adapt, learn, and act decisively with courage. Kale approached her quietly, his expression thoughtful. Lyra, you have proven more than I expected. You have saved lives, influenced strategy, and changed perspectives. Perhaps this is the beginning of a new understanding between our species. If we learn from each other, we can achieve far more than through conflict alone. These are the qualities that define true strength. As she looked out across the stars, she felt a connection to both worlds, humanity and her own species. She understood now that enemies were not always who they seemed, and that strength was not measured in weapons or power alone, but in the courage to act rightly, the intelligence to adapt, and the moral clarity to protect life. The planet below buzzed with activity, humans rebuilding, adapting, and thriving. Lyra knew that the future held challenges, but she also knew that it held hope. Humanity's resilience had inspired her, and she would carry that inspiration forward, guiding her actions and decisions in the uncertain days to come. Somewhere in the distance, a shadow flickered on the horizon, an unknown alien faction observing the events, intrigued by humanity's ingenuity and courage. Lyra sensed that this was only the beginning of a larger journey, one that would test all she had learned, and that would challenge the very assumptions of both humans and aliens. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had acted with intelligence, courage, and moral clarity. She had protected life, inspired change, and proven that humans were worthy of respect, not fear. And in that understanding, she had found the true strength of humanity and herself. The galaxy stretched before her, full of danger, uncertainty, and possibility. Yet for the first time, Lyra felt truly ready to face it. She would act wisely, bravely, and with understanding. She had seen the strength of humanity, and she would carry it forward, a beacon of intelligence, courage, and moral clarity in the vastness of space. The stars above shimmered like distant promises, and Lyra knew that her journey, and the journey of humanity, was only beginning. But now she was ready. She was not just an observer, not just a soldier. She was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of courage and understanding, and a testament to the enduring strength of humanity. The warship's engines hummed quietly, the galaxy waiting beyond the horizon. Lyra's eyes shone with determination. She had faced the ultimate test and emerged stronger, wiser, and more certain than ever of what it meant to survive, to lead, and to protect. The galaxy would never be the same again.